Well, Baldis Basics. It's not a new game to my channel at all. In fact, my first video on it was one of my most successful videos. However, talking about this game is often hard because of just the pure lack of information being given around any future plans for the title. But with the turn of the new year, it's safe to say we have actually a lot of things to talk about, and potentially similar to Hello Neighbor, Baldi could be preparing for a massive 2022, its biggest since its breakout back in 2018. Alright, so just as a recap, Baldi blew up back in 2018 after getting second place in a video game competition, giving it just enough traction for YouTubers to make videos on the small indie game, allowing for it to explode into absolutely massive success. Because I mean, despite the game generally just being a comedic yet scary Slender clone, there's videos out there with hundreds of millions of views, so it's clear the title was crazy big. But for the most part, that's all this game was, a basic Slender clone with a new approach, and while it definitely was a good title, the developer Micah needed somewhere to take the title after its success. And his plan was to keep developing Baldi, starting with a Kickstarter project that got successfully funded to turn Baldi into a full-blown title. So naturally, in the coming years, we've gotten quite a few updates to the game, with brand new characters, game mechanics, and most advanced of all, a seed-based map generation system with the goal of making the seemingly simplistic game infinitely replayable. Now, while all these plans are cool and super ambitious, most of them have sort of gone unnoticed throughout the game's lifetime. And this new upgraded version of Baldi, labeled as Baldis Basics Plus, hadn't really been talked about that much. Most people watching probably don't know about all these interesting and super cool updates because the full game's early access has really fallen under the radar. The game so far has seemingly turned directions, as this version changed the original deceptive horror game into more of a hide and seek style of game, really taking a lot of the initial horror from the first version away. Now this, among other things, are not things Micah seems to be worried about, because on my first video he actually commented on a lot of my concerns. He mentioned that the title was still planned to have horror elements added to the game. Just with the expansive and ambitious plans of the game, those things were said to have been pushed back a little bit to focus on the game's actual fundamentals. He also mentioned that the title's somewhat low-key launch has actually worked in his favor, as it's allowed him to work among his own little community, and the more under-the-radar style of this early access fits in with Micah's plans to relaunch and revamp the game when it's finally done and leaves early access in its 1.0 release. So far, it seems like Micah has everything under control, as he's handled the current state of the game incredibly well. The only thing that still somewhat bugs me about Baldis Basics Plus, besides the already addressed issues, is the fact that this game feels somewhat out of touch with its original version. Because even though there are plans to make the game a lot scarier and fit with previous themes, regardless, as of right now, this full game definitely just feels like Baldis Basics, with just a few other add-on mini-games and modes to go with it, rather than a fully fledged different title. Now, assuming this is as intended, which based on the name Baldis Basics Plus, it does seem to be, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different direction being taken than what I or maybe others were expecting with a full-blown Baldi title. But still, when playing the more recent versions of the game, something just feels different, and makes me wish we were back in 2018 playing the original simplistic Baldis Basics, seeing the title absolutely everywhere on YouTube again. Well, funny enough, Micah isn't just planning on working on this Baldis Basics Plus title and that being it. In fact, that most likely isn't going to be what's next for the franchise even, because recently we had gotten word about another Baldi title set to release soon, that of which being called Baldis Basics Classic Remastered. So for those unaware, with the new Baldis Basics Plus in development, the original and less developed version we all knew and loved from the initial game competition was relabeled to Baldis Basics Classic version, which, just as a side note, was also conveniently ported onto mobile. So after a few unofficial announcements of this title, the game was officially listed on Steam as a coming soon title that can be wishlisted today. Looking at the Steam page, we could see a few things about this game's actual specifics and what will be changing from the original classic version. So based on the screenshots, we could already see the title looks strikingly similar visually, and it's possible that honestly, with the game still being in development, these images may have been pulled straight from the first game. Based on the description, clearly there will be multiple different modes in the classic, allowing for us to replay the special birthday bash event, along with, of course, the original mode. This remaster is also supposed to add some different aspects from Baldis Basics Plus into it, like the ability to play the game endlessly, along with many other polishing changes. AI is supposed to be improved, the atmosphere is expecting an improvement, and of course, the since held back horror elements in the newer titles are being brought back for this remaster. Things like the deceptive educational aspects are going to be repeated, obviously, and overall, this title seems just like, well, obviously a remastered version of the original. Now, with that being said, I think this game could have the potential to come back. I mean, playing Baldi has always been incredibly popular, and despite the game's drop in popularity, YouTubers like Markiplier have still played every integration of the title up to Baldis Basics Plus, and other YouTubers are even still covering the title on occasions to this day. So I think that this update is definitely going to bring some hype back for the title. The only worry I have about it is the fact that there really isn't that much being done here. The game will surely have some quality of life improvements, and overall it seems like it's obviously going to be the best way to play Baldi over the original earlier builds, but fundamentally the title isn't changing at all. And especially if you've already played Baldi Plus, every core mechanic in this title is going to be something that you've already seen, just with a better finish over it. But this title will be pretty cool. It'll most likely be a big deal for like a week when it releases, and then go probably just as fast. However, I feel like to an extent this is a calculated move by Micah, and what really gives me hope for the future of Baldi is actually what happens after this title's release. So clearly this game isn't built to be huge at all. Just seems like a minor project that won't be any different than what we're really expecting. However, that could be the key thing that can make this game so important. The fact that it's such an unbelievably familiar concept. This game, as mentioned probably a million times, is going to bring people back to Baldi. Not because it's the next ambitious leap for the franchise, but rather just to go and enjoy what we had back in 2018 and relive the old memories once again. And even though most likely this title's lifetime will be incredibly short, regardless, it's going to get people talking about it again. And while this one game doesn't really have much going for it when it comes to bringing Baldi entirely back, we do still have this other multi-year project Micah has spent so much time and passion on. And as mentioned, he was planning on having a new rollout of the game once it finally leaves early access. So in other words, he wants to relaunch the project when it's finished and hopefully get it out to more eyes than ever before. Now, if you were in his situation with these two games, how would you release them both? Well, to me, the answer seems somewhat simple. This remastered Baldi title is going to refamiliarize everybody to the bold green shirt wearing evil teacher. And after everybody gets reinvested in the title, this other fully fledged expansion on the series with years worth of development that we've been talking about could release alongside it and absolutely explode. So the TLDR of all of that is basically my theory for Baldi and its future is that they're gearing up for a comeback. And if Micah wants to relaunch his long-awaited Baldis Basics Plus successfully, there would be no better way of releasing it to everybody than bringing back the original beloved version in a refreshed form, and then when everybody is re-obsessing over the title, say, by the way, remember that Baldi title you guys are revisiting? Well, I spent all of these years working and redeveloping an absolutely explosive version of it, and boom, Baldi comes back with Baldis Basics Plus. Well, at least in an ideal scenario. Obviously, developing and marketing games is way easier said than done, especially when the person expected to be creating a game is just that, a singular person. So this is just an ideal scenario in my own head. But in all reality, the only person who really has a true version for the title is going to be Micah himself. But it really does seem like when it comes to the remastered version of Baldi, the franchise this year is definitely gearing up to make its final return. There is no actual release date for pretty much any of this, and with the as mentioned fact that this is a one-man team working here, I wouldn't expect pretty much anything to be concrete. But the remastered version already has a full-blown Steam page and was said to be nearing completion back in November. So in 2022, expect to see Baldi at least have a brief flashback to where it was in its heyday. And this will be while titles like Hello Neighbor, Bendy, Cuphead, among many others are expected to make their long-awaited returns. And while these titles are just as famous for their gameplay as they are their lack of consistency, I still have tons of hope and cannot wait to see what's next for this franchise with the many others. Subscribe and peace.